Well, the market is anticipating a negative quarter for the March quarter. That's because there were bushfires which had a significant economic impact. That's because the restrictions were already in place in that March quarter. We know that we closed the borders to China from early February, as well as obviously the social distancing rules coming in over the course of March. But the Australian economy has been remarkably resilient. We went into this crisis from a position of economic strength, and that's going to help us come out of this crisis. So the numbers will be what they are on March. That's what the market is expecting, and I look forward to informing the public at the right time on Wednesday when we get the numbers. Well, the housing sector, the construction industry are vitally important to the Australian economy. There's more than 1 million Australians who are employed in construction. Dwelling investment is worth more than $100 billion, or around 5% of GDP, to the economy. We saw last year about 200,000 homes being built across the country. I said in my ministerial statement recently that we see dwelling investment down around 20% through the June quarter. So the government is working through an announcement to be made shortly about support that we can give to the housing sector, because we recognise that it's a long supply chain. It's not just the sparky and the plumber and the carpenter on the building site. It's also the timber mill. It's also the appliance manufacturer for the new kitchen. It's also those who help with the materials that go into the bathroom. There are lots and lots of contributors to that supply chain to new construction in the housing sector and more broadly. In terms of the arts sector, we also recognise that there is a need there for continued support, and we are working on our options. But I also point out that many in the arts sector have been receiving the JobKeeper payment as well as the JobSeeker payment. Likewise, in the construction sector, it's the #1 industry covered by businesses who have taken up JobKeeper. So, of course, JobKeeper has made a big difference to that sector through this difficult period.
And why should home renovators be working with government stimulus? What stops them from taking?
Well, look, we'll wait for the details of the announcement to be made. But what I can tell you is we're focused on one thing: jobs. We're focused on getting people back into work. We're focused on ensuring that the private sector can continue to stimulate growth as we come out of this pandemic, which has been so damaging for the economy.
We've got the phone. We just got the phone program.
Daniel.
Daniel, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's Daniel Hurst here from The Guardian. Just on the construction side of things, if you do go down the route of providing support for renovation projects, what sort of conditions might you be contemplating? For example, would it be targeted towards energy efficiency projects? And secondly, the government has flagged extra targeted support for construction and tourism. Are there any other sectors that might need extra targeted help, such as the charities?
Well, thanks, Daniel. Well, again, the details of the announcement will be clear at that particular time. But what we're focused on is jobs, and what we're focused on is meeting that gap in demand that will inevitably occur in the back half of this year. There is a pipeline of work which is currently underway, but because of the pandemic, because of the impact that's having on demand and confidence more generally, there's going to be a supply gap and there's going to be a demand gap in the second half of the year, and that's what we're working on. In terms of more generally other sectors, we've already announced support for the aviation sector. That's a sector that's been particularly hit. We set up a fund which was designed to support the tourism sector, and we continue to work on other options as well. But we recognise that JobKeeper, JobSeeker is complementary to a number of other programs and initiatives, a range of other sectors.
Evan Black at the New Daily.
Evan.
Hi, Treasurer. It's Ewan Black from the New Daily here. Can you hear me okay?
Ewan, yes, I have, yeah.
Yes, hi there. Just another follow-up question to the proposed home buyer grant. I understand that the scheme, the details of the scheme haven't been released yet, but are you concerned at all that some of the money could be spent on grants for people who had planned would buy a new home anyway, and perhaps on grants that are perhaps already under construction? And further to that, given how bad the construction industry is likely to be hit, will the federal government consider announcing a plan to build more social housing to boost the economy? While also building more social housing, of course, would help bridge the current shortfall in social affordable homes too.
Well, firstly, we recognise that the states are also partners with us in a number of housing projects and initiatives, and we have already announced previous initiatives on social housing, and what we do recognise is there's a gap in the market here. So we will have more to say in due course, but what we're seeking to do is to get people to undertake construction activities, whether it's a new home or otherwise, that may have not otherwise been the case, and that's because the economy's taken a hit and they've decided to stay on the sidelines. So what we're trying to do is to generate more activity at a time when the economy needs it, and of course more activity means more jobs.
Pat Commons at the Oz.
Well, hi, Treasurer. Thanks very much. I had a question around superannuation, the early access to superannuation. There was more evidence in this morning's paper that people who are accessing their super early aren't using it for emergency means, aren't using it for means of hardship, instead spending on things like bedding and food. Are you concerned about this, and are there any plans to perhaps tighten up the eligibility or look at the scheme for the second half of it, which is the next $10,000, which can be accessed per month coming financial year?
Well, Pat, firstly, consistent with Treasury's forecasts, we've seen about $15 billion in super being accessed early. About 1.8 million people have accessed super early, and some of them are Australians and others are temporary residents, and that's important to understand. This is their money, and they will use that money for a range of purposes. But we're going through a once-in-a-century pandemic, and people do need that extra funding, that extra financial support over and above other government initiatives to help them get through this period. Now, this money is tax-free, and that's been an important initiative by the government, and it's been welcome. So we are comfortable with the fact that people are accessing their money at a time when they need it most, because as you would be aware, Pat, there are already provisions within the superannuation laws for people to access early because of hardship their super. We think this is a continuation of that, and it's money that's going to people's needs.